My daughter banned me from her wedding, so I canceled the venue and did this." When Ava announced her engagement, the joy in her voice was infectious. She called me one evening, her words tumbling out in excited bursts. "Dad, he proposed," she exclaimed, her tone bright and giddy. "We're getting married." For a moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride. My daughter, the little girl who used to climb into my lap for bedtime stories, who cried on my shoulder during her first heartbreak, was now embarking on a new chapter in her life. "That's amazing, sweetheart," I said, my voice steady even though my emotions were swirling. "Congratulations. I'm so happy for you and Matt." The news was a bittersweet reminder of how much had changed over the years. Ava and I had always shared a close bond when she was younger, but as she grew older, the distance between us seemed to grow as well. Some of it was natural. Teenagers often pull away, but some of it was the result of misunderstandings and conflicts, many of which I suspected she hadn't fully forgiven me for. Still, I saw her engagement as an opportunity to bridge that gap. "Have you started planning yet?" I asked, wanting to be involved in any way I could. "Not much," she admitted. "Matt and I have been talking about venues, but everything's so expensive. We want something elegant but not over the top." "Let me help," I offered without hesitation. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Help how?" "I'll pay for the venue," I said. "It's my gift to you and Matt. I want your wedding day to be as special as possible." Her voice softened, and I could hear the gratitude in her words. "Thank you, Dad. That means so much to me." In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was my chance to rebuild our relationship, to show her how much I cared and how proud I was of the person she had become. The following weekend, Ava and I toured venues together. It was just the two of us. Matt had work, and Ava said she valued my input. As we walked through manicured gardens and grand ballrooms, I saw flashes of the little girl who used to dream about fairy tale weddings. When we arrived at the estate Ava had been eyeing, her face lit up. "Dad, this is it," she said, her eyes sparkling as she looked around the expansive grounds, the rolling hills, the ornate chandeliers in the ballroom, and the picturesque gazebo for the ceremony. It was everything she had imagined. "Are you sure this is the one?" I asked, smiling at her enthusiasm. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Then let's make it happen," I said, signing the paperwork that same day. As we left the venue, Ava hugged me tightly. "I can't believe this is really happening," she said. "Thank you for making this possible, Dad. I couldn't have done it without you." Her words filled me with pride and a sense of purpose. Despite the distance that had grown between us, I believe this was a step toward mending our bond. I couldn't have imagined, in that moment, how quickly that sense of hope would unravel. The weeks following Ava's venue selection felt like a whirlwind. She would call me occasionally to update me on the wedding plans, her dress fittings, the catering options, the color scheme for the decor. Each conversation was brief but filled with excitement, and I relished the opportunity to be involved in her big day. But then, the updates stopped. At first, I didn't think much of it. Weddings are stressful to plan, and I assumed Ava was just caught up in the details. But as days turned into weeks with no calls, no texts, and no mention of her progress, I began to feel the first hints of unease. It wasn't until I bumped into a mutual friend, Linda, at the grocery store that my unease turned into suspicion. "I'm so excited for Ava's wedding," Linda said, her voice filled with warmth. "It's such a beautiful venue. She must be thrilled." "She is," I replied, forcing a smile. "Have you seen the guest list yet?" Linda's expression flickered with something I couldn't quite place. "Oh, I'm sure it'll be wonderful. Everyone who's important to her will be there." Her words lingered long after we parted ways. Something about the way she said them felt off, almost as if there was a subtext I wasn't privy to. That evening, as I sat at my desk, my unease grew into something stronger. I opened my laptop and searched for Ava's wedding group on social media, a private group she had mentioned in passing months earlier. When I couldn't find it, my stomach churned. It wasn't there, not because it didn't exist, but because I wasn't included. Frowning, I called one of Ava's cousins, Sarah, hoping for some clarification. "Hey, Sarah," I said, keeping my tone light. Have you heard anything about Ava's wedding? I've been a little out of the loop lately. Sarah hesitated before answering. Yeah. I'm in the group chat. Why? Can you send me the link? I asked, my voice tightening despite my efforts to stay calm. The pause on the other end was deafening. I thought you were already in it, Sarah said finally. Ava didn't include you? My chest tightened. I guess not, I said, doing my best to sound unaffected. Could you send it anyway? When Sarah sent me the link, I clicked on it immediately, only to be greeted by a notification. You don't have permission to view this page. I stared at the screen, the reality sinking in like a weight pressing on my chest. Ava hadn't just forgotten to include me. She had deliberately excluded me from her wedding plans. The next morning, I called the venue, hoping for some clarity. The coordinator, who had been so accommodating during the booking process, sounded cheerful as she answered. Hi, this is Michael, I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions brewing inside me. I'm calling about Ava's wedding. I wanted to check on the arrangements. Of course, she said. Everything's coming along beautifully. Ava's been in touch with us frequently to finalize the details. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Ava had been coordinating everything. Without me. Can you confirm something for me? I asked, my tone carefully controlled. Am I listed as a guest? There was a brief pause before she replied. I'd need to double-check the guest list, but I don't recall seeing your name. The confirmation, while expected, still felt like a blow. I ended the call quickly, thanking her for her time, and sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. The betrayal stung deeper than I could have imagined. Not only had Ava excluded me from the plans, but she had also done so while accepting my financial support. It was as though my role in her life had been reduced to nothing more than a wallet. The next evening, I called Ava, determined to have a candid conversation. My heart was pounding as the phone rang, a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief swirling inside me. Hey, Dad. Ava answered brightly, as if nothing was wrong. Ava, I began, my voice steady but firm. We need to talk. I want to know why I'm not on the guest list for your wedding. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. What do you mean? She asked, her tone hesitant. You know exactly what I mean, I replied. I've seen the guest list. I've spoken to the venue. You didn't invite me, Ava. Why? She sighed heavily, her cheerful tone replaced by defensiveness. Dad, it's not that simple. Then make it simple, I said. You accepted my help to pay for this wedding. I've done everything I could to support you. And now I find out you've deliberately excluded me? Explain that to me. She hesitated, and when she finally spoke, her voice was sharper. Look, I didn't want any drama, okay? You and Mom can't even be in the same room without arguing, and I didn't want that on my wedding day. I clenched my jaw, struggling to keep my emotions in check. Ava, that's not an excuse. I'm your father. I deserve to be there, regardless of how things are with your mother. I didn't want to deal with the stress, she said, her voice quieter now. It's supposed to be a happy day, and I didn't think you'd understand. Understand what? I asked, the hurt in my voice impossible to hide. That you'd rather cut me out of your life than deal with a little awkwardness? That my role in your wedding begins and ends with writing a check? That's not fair, she snapped. You don't know how hard this has been for me. And you don't know how hard it is to hear this from my own daughter. I shot back. You've made your decision, Ava. Now you have to live with the consequences. The conversation ended abruptly, with Ava hanging up after muttering a terse, "Fine." I sat in silence, staring at the phone in my hand, the weight of her words pressing down on me. I had known we weren't as close as we once were, but I never imagined she would go this far. It felt like a betrayal on a level I hadn't thought possible, one that cut deeper because it came from someone I loved unconditionally. The next day, I spoke with my wife about the situation. Though we had our own issues, she listened carefully, her expression a mix of sympathy and anger. She's acting selfish, she said bluntly. You've done everything for her, and this is how she repays you? I just don't understand, I said, shaking my head. What did I do to deserve this? It's not about you, she said. She's making it about herself, and if she doesn't appreciate what you've done, that's on her. Her words offered little comfort, but they gave me clarity. I couldn't force Ava to include me, but I also couldn't continue to support her wedding as if everything was fine. After the heated conversation with Ava, I spent the next few days grappling with what to do. The betrayal lingered, not just because she had excluded me from her wedding, but because she didn't seem to think I deserved an explanation. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I couldn't continue to support an event I wasn't even welcome at. Helping her pay for the wedding was supposed to be an act of love, a way to celebrate one of the most important moments of her life. But now, it felt like I was being used, a nameless benefactor funding a day I wouldn't even get to witness. That morning, I picked up the phone and called the venue. "Hi, this is Michael," I said to the event coordinator. "I'm the one who booked Ava's wedding at your estate." "Oh, yes, Mr. Michael," she replied warmly. "How can I help you today?" "I need to cancel the booking," I said, keeping my tone steady. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Cancel? I'm so sorry to hear that. May I ask why?" "It's a personal matter," I said, avoiding the urge to explain further. "I just need to know the next steps to finalize the cancellation." She walked me through the process, mentioning the cancellation fees and assuring me that everything would be handled promptly. I thanked her and ended the call, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. The act of canceling the venue felt like reclaiming a piece of my dignity, but it also marked the end of the hope I had held on to, that Ava and I could mend our relationship through this wedding. It didn't take long for Ava to find out. That evening, my phone rang, and her name flashed on the screen. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Dad, what the hell?" she said as soon as I picked up. Her voice was sharp, a mix of anger and disbelief. "What's going on, Ava?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "You canceled the venue," she shouted. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The wedding is in a few weeks, and now we don't have a place." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I canceled the venue because I'm not paying for a wedding I'm not invited to." Her silence on the other end spoke volumes. "Dad, that's not fair," she said finally, her tone defensive. "You knew how important this was to me." "I did," I said evenly. "And I thought I was important to you too. But clearly, I was wrong. You made the choice to exclude me, Ava. All I did was follow your lead." "You're being petty," she snapped. "You're ruining my wedding out of spite." "Spite," I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "No, Ava, this isn't about spite. This is about respect. You can't take my money and shut me out of your life at the same time. If I'm not good enough to be at your wedding, then my money isn't either." She let out an exasperated sigh. "I can't believe you're doing this to me," she said. "Do you even care about me at all?" Her words stung, but I refused to let her manipulate the situation. "I care about you more than you realize," I said. "But love doesn't mean letting someone walk all over you. You made your decision, Ava. Now you have to live with the consequences." She hung up without another word, leaving me alone with the weight of everything that had just unfolded. After the call, I sat in silence, replaying her words in my head. I didn't regret canceling the venue. It was the right thing to do. But the rift between us felt deeper than ever. Despite her actions, I still loved Ava. I wanted her to be happy, to have the wedding of her dreams. But I also needed her to understand that her choices had hurt me in a way that couldn't simply be ignored. I spoke with my wife that evening, recounting the call. "She'll come around," she said, though her tone lacked conviction. "She just needs time to realize what she's done." "I hope you're right," I said, though a part of me wasn't so sure. The days leading up to Ava's wedding were strangely quiet. I hadn't heard from her since the heated phone call about the venue cancellation, and while part of me hoped she would reach out to reconcile, another part knew that might be wishful thinking. Through mutual friends and family, I learned that the fallout from my decision had been significant. Ava and Matt scrambled to find a replacement venue, and with the wedding just weeks away, their options were limited. What they eventually settled on was a small community hall, far from the grandeur of the estate she had fallen in love with. I felt no satisfaction in hearing about their struggles. If anything, I felt a pang of guilt, even though I knew I had made the right decision. The wedding day came and went without a single word from Ava. I knew I wasn't invited, but it still stung to be excluded from such an important milestone in her life. That morning, I busied myself with small tasks around the house, anything to keep my mind off what was happening. But as the hours passed, I couldn't help but imagine the scenes unfolding. Ava in her dress, the vows, the smiles, the laughter. My wife, sensing my unease, suggested we go for a drive. "It's better than sitting here and thinking about it," she said gently. We ended up at a quiet park, sitting on a bench as the sun began to set. "You did what you had to do," she said after a long silence. "You didn't ruin her wedding, Michael. You just reminded her that relationships are a two-way street." I nodded, but the ache in my chest remained. In the days that followed, I started hearing from other family members about the wedding. Some called to express their disappointment in Ava's decision to exclude me, while others seemed more interested in fueling the drama. "She really shot herself in the foot," one cousin said. "That venue you booked would have been perfect. The place they ended up with felt so rushed." Another family friend mentioned that Ava had tried to justify my absence by saying I wasn't comfortable attending. "She told everyone you wanted to avoid seeing her mother," they said. The lies hurt, but I chose not to engage. I had no interest in defending myself to people who didn't know the full story. One of the more surprising calls came from Matt, Ava's husband, a few days after the wedding. "Hi, Michael," he said hesitantly. "I just wanted to reach out and, well, apologize. I was caught off guard." "For what?" "For how everything went down," he admitted. "I know things between you and Ava haven't been great, but I didn't agree with the way she handled it. I should have said something sooner." His words, though unexpected, offered a small sense of validation. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "I just want what's best for Ava. I hope you two are happy together." "We are," he said. "And for what it's worth, I think she'll come around eventually. She just needs time." Despite Matt's optimism, the weeks after the wedding felt heavy. Ava and I still weren't speaking, and the weight of our estrangement was difficult to carry. I tried to focus on the positives, spending more time with my wife, pursuing hobbies I had neglected, and leaning on the friends who had supported me through the ordeal. But there were moments when the sadness crept in, when I found myself staring at old photos of Ava as a child, wondering how we had ended up here. Months passed after Ava's wedding, and the silence between us remained unbroken. It was a strange kind of limbo, knowing she was out there, living her life, but being completely shut out from it. I tried to focus on other aspects of my life, pouring myself into hobbies and spending more time with friends and family, but there was a persistent ache that refused to fade. The rift between Ava and me rippled through the family. Some relatives supported my decision, agreeing that Ava had acted selfishly. Others took her side, insisting that I should have handled things differently. "She's your daughter," one relative told me during a family gathering. "You're supposed to rise above it, no matter what." And I did, I replied. I supported her. I gave her everything she asked for. But love doesn't mean letting yourself be disrespected. Not everyone agreed, but I stood firm in my choice. As the months turned into a year, I found myself reflecting deeply on my role as a father. I had always tried to be there for Ava, to support her in every way I could. But somewhere along the way, our relationship had frayed. Had I been too distant during her teenage years? Had I been too strict? Or was this simply who Ava had become? Someone who saw relationships as transactional rather than emotional? The questions weighed on me, but I knew there were no easy answers. On the anniversary of her wedding, I decided to reach out. I wrote Ava a letter, hoping to express my feelings in a way that words over the phone couldn't capture. "Dear Ava," I began, my handwriting careful and deliberate. "I've spent the past year thinking about everything that happened, about your wedding, about our relationship, and about where we go from here. I want you to know that I love you. I've always loved you, and that will never change. But love isn't just about giving. It's about respect and trust, too. When you chose to exclude me from your wedding, it hurt me more than I can put into words. Not because of the money, but because it felt like you didn't value me as your father. I understand that we've had our differences, and I'm not perfect. But I hope we can find a way to move forward. You're my daughter, and I want to be part of your life, not just as a bystander, but as someone you can rely on. The door is always open, Ava. No matter what." I mailed the letter the next day, unsure if she would even read it. Weeks passed with no response, and I began to accept that I might never hear from Ava again. But one afternoon, as I sat on the porch reading, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Ava. "Hi, Dad. I got your letter. Can we talk?" Her words were simple, but they carried a weight I hadn't realized I was holding on to. We arranged to meet for coffee a few days later, and while I tried to keep my expectations in check, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. When I saw Ava sitting at the cafe, she looked different, more subdued, more thoughtful. "Hi, Dad," she said as I approached. "Hi, sweetheart," I replied, my voice softer than I expected. The conversation that followed was tentative at first, but as we talked, the walls between us began to come down. Ava admitted that she had acted out of frustration and selfishness, that she had felt overwhelmed by the pressure of planning the wedding and hadn't known how to handle the tension between me and her mother. "I thought excluding you would make things easier," she said, her voice tinged with regret, "but it only made everything worse." "I wasn't upset about the wedding itself," I told her. "I was upset because it felt like you didn't want me to be part of your life." "I do want you to be part of my life," she said, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't know how to handle everything, and I'm sorry." Her apology wasn't a magic fix. It couldn't erase the hurt of the past year, but it was a start. As we parted ways that day, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. Ava and I still had a lot to work through, but the fact that she was willing to reach out, to talk, meant more than I could express. To anyone who has faced estrangement from a loved one, I want to say this. Relationships are messy, and they don't always follow a straight path. But love is about keeping the door open, even when it feels like it's been slammed shut. Here's to hope, forgiveness, and the courage to rebuild.